Life has a strange way of surprising us, often when we least expect it. Sometimes, all it takes is one small act of kindness to set off a chain of events that changes everything. Today, I want to share with you a story about a man named Ethan, a story of struggle, resilience, and the incredible power of compassion. Ethan wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to find in the middle of a life changing moment. He didn't have a flashy career or a life filled with wealth and luxury. In fact, he was the opposite. A hardworking man, Ethan had seen better days, but life had dealt him a difficult hand in recent years. He'd lost his job at a company where he had worked for over a decade, and his savings, once a safety net, were now dwindling at an alarming rate. On top of that, his personal life was in shambles after a painful breakup that left him feeling more alone than ever. But if there was one thing about Ethan, it was his heart. Despite everything, he had always believed in the good in people. Even when the world seemed to turn its back on him, he never stopped treating others with kindness and respect. Maybe it was this unwavering belief in humanity that kept him going, even when life felt impossible. Ethan worked part time at a small cafe in his neighborhood. The pay wasn't great, but it helped him keep the lights on and food on the table. Barely. Every day, he served customers with a genuine smile, even when his own worries weighed heavily on his mind. To those who visited the cafe, Ethan was just another friendly face. No one could have guessed the silent battles he was fighting. But then, one seemingly ordinary evening, something extraordinary happened. It started with a simple decision, a moment of kindness that would ripple through Ethan's life in ways he could never imagine. An elderly woman walked into the cafe that night. She appeared frail, her worn out clothes and tired expression telling a story of hardship. She moved slowly, her eyes scanning the menu as if trying to make a decision that wouldn't strain her limited resources. Ethan watched her from behind the counter, his heart aching for the struggles she clearly bore. Without giving it much thought, Ethan made a choice. He approached her table, placed a warm meal before her, and simply said, "This one's on the house." She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes, her gratitude unspoken yet palpable. For Ethan, it wasn't about recognition or praise. It was a simple gesture, one human helping another. Little did he know that single moment of kindness would change his life forever. And so, Ethan's journey began, a journey filled with unexpected surprises, deep revelations, and a transformation that would leave him and everyone around him forever changed. Ethan's life hadn't always been this difficult. Just a few years ago, he was thriving, working as a logistics manager for a mid sized company. His job was stable, his income reliable, and he had dreams of building a future filled with promise. But like so many others, Ethan's world was turned upside down when his company downsized. In the blink of an eye, he found himself among the countless others swept up in the wave of layoffs. At first, Ethan remained optimistic. He poured his energy into job applications, networking events, and interviews. Weeks turned into months, and despite his best efforts, the rejections kept coming. As his savings dwindled, so did his confidence. To make matters worse, the stress and uncertainty began to take a toll on his relationship. His partner, unable to bear the mounting pressure, decided to leave. Alone and struggling to stay afloat, Ethan moved into a modest apartment, a far cry from the home he once shared. Determined to survive, Ethan took a part-time job at a local cafe. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough to cover the essentials: rent, utilities, and a simple diet. Every day was a test of endurance as he juggled long hours and an uncertain future. The cafe was small, frequented by regulars who came for the familiar comfort of freshly brewed coffee and homemade pastries. Ethan had grown accustomed to the routine, finding solace in the predictable rhythm of taking orders and wiping down tables. But behind his kind smile was a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Nights were often sleepless, filled with the anxiety of unpaid bills and unanswered questions about what the future held. Would he ever find stable work again? Would his life ever regain the sense of security and purpose it once had? Still, despite his struggles, Ethan never allowed bitterness to take root. He treated every customer with kindness, often going the extra mile to brighten someone's day. Deep down, he clung to the belief that things would eventually get better, that his hard work and compassion would lead him somewhere meaningful. Little did he know, his belief in kindness was about to be put to the ultimate test. It was a quiet evening at the cafe, the kind where the ticking of the clock felt louder than usual. Ethan was finishing up his shift, wiping down the counters and preparing to close for the night. As the last few customers trickled out, an elderly woman entered the cafe. Her frail frame and hesitant steps caught Ethan's attention immediately. She wore a patched coat that had seen better days, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a small coin purse. Her eyes darted to the menu board above the counter, but her expression gave away her concern. It was clear she was calculating whether she could afford even the simplest item on the menu. Ethan observed her quietly, his heart sinking at the sight. After a few moments of deliberation, she approached the counter. "Could I get a small coffee, please?" she asked softly, her voice almost trembling. As she began counting coins from her purse, Ethan made a decision that would change his life forever. "You know what?" he said, offering her a warm smile. "Let me take care of this. How about a hot meal instead? It's on the house." The woman froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Oh, I couldn't possibly," she began, but Ethan gently insisted. "It's no trouble at all," he replied. "Everyone deserves a warm meal, especially on a cold night like this." Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded her thanks, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "Thank you. You're very kind." As she sat down to enjoy her meal, Ethan returned to his tasks, thinking little of his gesture. For him, it was simply the right thing to do. But for the elderly woman, it was an act of compassion she would never forget, and one that would ripple back into Ethan's life in ways he could never have imagined. The next morning began like any other for Ethan. He woke up to the faint light of dawn streaming through the cracks in his curtains. The air was crisp, and the world outside his window seemed unusually quiet. As he opened his front door to retrieve the newspaper, something unusual caught his eye. Sitting on the worn welcome mat was a small package, neatly wrapped in plain brown paper. A note was attached, its handwriting unfamiliar and simple. "Thank you for your kindness. It meant more than you know." Ethan frowned, puzzled by the unexpected delivery. He picked up the package and carried it inside, his curiosity growing with every step. Sitting at his modest kitchen table, he carefully unwrapped the package, his hands trembling slightly. What he found inside left him speechless. An envelope filled with cash rested inside the paper, the crisp bills stacked neatly. Ethan's heart raced as he counted the money, enough to pay off months of overdue bills and still have some left to spare. It was a gift that could buy him time, stability, and the faintest glimmer of hope. He stared at the note, turning it over in his hands, searching for any clue about its sender. But there was no signature, no return address, no indication of who might have left it. His mind raced back to the events of the previous evening. The old woman's face flashed in his memory. Could it be her? It seemed impossible, yet she was the only person who stood out. Confusion mingled with gratitude as Ethan tried to make sense of the situation. Whoever had sent this gift wanted to remain anonymous. But why? And how had they known where he lived? These unanswered questions lingered as Ethan felt the first flicker of hope in a long time, unaware that this was only the beginning of a remarkable journey. The following day, Ethan stepped outside with a new sense of anticipation, half expecting another surprise. Sure enough, as he opened his door, there was another package waiting for him. This time, it was a small box, carefully tied with a ribbon. Attached to it was another note, just as simple as the first. "For you, with gratitude." Ethan brought the box inside, his curiosity growing. When he opened it, his breath caught in his throat. Inside was a set of car keys. His eyes widened as he noticed the familiar logo on the keychain. It belonged to a popular, reliable car brand. Heart pounding, he grabbed his coat and stepped outside to investigate. Parked just a few steps from his apartment building was a sleek, gently used car. It gleamed in the morning sunlight, looking worlds apart from the old, unreliable clunker Ethan had been driving, when it worked at all. He pressed the unlock button, and the car's lights flashed in response. For a moment, Ethan could do nothing but stand there, stunned. His thoughts swirled. Who was behind this? And why were they going to such lengths to help him? He thought back to the elderly woman at the cafe. Could she really have been the one orchestrating this? The thought seemed unlikely, but he couldn't dismiss it entirely. Determined to find answers, Ethan began asking around. He spoke to his neighbors, hoping someone had seen who delivered the packages, but no one had. He visited the local post office, only to find there were no records of any recent deliveries to his address. Frustrated yet intrigued, Ethan resolved to keep looking for the mysterious benefactor. Deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the kind stranger he had helped that night at the cafe was somehow connected. Days passed, and Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious gifts. The envelopes of cash, the car, they were life-changing, and yet they came with no explanation. Every time he thought about the elderly woman from the cafe, his curiosity grew. Could it really be her? And if so, why would someone he barely knew go to such extraordinary lengths for him? Ethan began spending more time at the cafe, hoping she might return. He kept an eye on the door during every shift, half expecting to see her frail figure walk in. But each day ended with disappointment. Still, he clung to hope, convinced that the answers would come if he stayed patient. Then, one quiet evening, just as Ethan was preparing to close up, the door creaked open. He looked up, and his heart skipped a beat. There she was, the elderly woman from that fateful night. But this time, something was different. She no longer looked frail or downtrodden. Her posture was straight, her movements purposeful. She wore a simple yet elegant outfit, her gray hair neatly styled. Her presence radiated calm confidence, and her eyes sparkled with warmth. Ethan stood frozen, unsure of what to say. The woman approached him with a gentle smile. "Hello, Ethan," she said softly. "I've been waiting for the right moment to speak with you." Ethan quickly invited her to sit at a quiet corner table, his mind racing with questions. As they settled in, she introduced herself. "My name is Eleanor," she said, "and I'm here to thank you for your kindness." Ethan blinked, taken aback. "The gifts, they were from you?" Eleanor nodded. "Yes. That night, when you paid for my meal, you didn't know me or my circumstances. Yet, you showed me kindness without expecting anything in return. That meant more to me than you can imagine." She explained that she wasn't the destitute woman she appeared to be that evening. In truth, Eleanor was a retired businesswoman who had built a fortune over the years. "I often visit places like your cafe, dressed as I was, to remind myself of the compassion that still exists in the world. That night, your act of kindness touched me deeply." Ethan listened in awe, struggling to process her words. Eleanor continued, her tone serious but kind. "I've spent my life building wealth, but I've learned that the greatest treasures are found in people. And I see something special in you, Ethan." Her next words left him speechless. "I want to do more than thank you. I want to help you rebuild your life." Ethan sat across from Eleanor, her words echoing in his mind. She wanted to help him rebuild his life? The idea felt almost surreal, but the sincerity in her voice and the warmth in her eyes told him she meant every word. Eleanor leaned forward, her tone calm but purposeful. "I've been fortunate in life," she began, "and I've always believed in using my blessings to uplift others. I see strength in you, Ethan. Strength, kindness, and potential. That's why I've chosen to invest in you." Ethan listened intently as she explained her plan. She owned several small businesses around town, enterprises she had carefully nurtured over the years. One of them, a logistics company, had an opening for a managerial position. It was the kind of role Ethan had dreamed of returning to, a far cry from his part-time job at the cafe. "I want you to take this position," Eleanor said. "It won't be easy, and there will be challenges, but I believe you're more than capable. This is your chance to start fresh, to rebuild not just your career, but your confidence." Ethan could barely find the words to respond. He felt a surge of gratitude and disbelief all at once. "Why me?" he finally managed to ask. Eleanor's smile softened. "Because you didn't do what you did for recognition or reward. You helped me when you didn't have much to give, simply because it was the right thing to do. That kind of selflessness is rare." In the weeks that followed, Eleanor became more than just Ethan's benefactor. She became his mentor. She guided him through the transition into his new role, teaching him not only about business, but also about resilience, leadership, and the importance of compassion. Under her guidance, Ethan didn't just regain his footing, he began to thrive. Months passed, and Ethan's life underwent a complete transformation. The man who once struggled to keep the lights on now found himself thriving in ways he could have never imagined. The managerial role Eleanor offered him not only gave him financial stability, but also rekindled a sense of purpose he thought he had lost forever. But the true gift Eleanor gave Ethan was more profound than any job or material wealth. She believed in him, saw potential in him when he couldn't see it in himself. Her mentorship became a cornerstone of his growth, helping him rebuild not just his career, but his confidence and outlook on life. What started as a simple act of kindness, a hot meal for a stranger, had blossomed into a life-changing partnership. Ethan and Eleanor's bond deepened over time. They worked together to expand her businesses, but more importantly, they shared a commitment to helping others. Inspired by his own journey, Ethan suggested creating programs to support struggling individuals in the community, people who, like him, just needed a second chance. Eleanor wholeheartedly agreed, and together they turned this vision into a reality. Looking back, Ethan often marveled at how much had changed, all because he chose kindness, even when he had little to give. He learned a powerful lesson. Small acts of compassion could ripple outward, creating profound change not just for the recipient, but for the giver as well. One evening, as Ethan locked up his office, he paused to reflect on how far he'd come. His struggles were now memories, not burdens. His life was full of purpose and connection. And every time he thought about that simple gesture at the cafe, a smile spread across his face. Kindness, he realized, truly had the power to change everything.